On a sweltering June afternoon in 2019, Joseph Lancha, the leader of the Hells Angels in Rhode Island, opened fire on a truck belonging to rival gang member Richard Stano. While no one was injured, the act served as a stark warning. The Hells Angels were fiercely protecting their territory. This incident set off a chain of investigations, leading authorities to uncover weapons, drugs, and chilling witness testimonies. Lancha's prosecution eventually revealed the dark, violent heart of the gang, exposing horrifying practices ranging from torture to executions. The case raised the question, how far would you go to seize and maintain power? At the center of it all was Joseph Lancha, whose actions in June 2019 triggered a sensational trial that shed light on the brutal world of the Hells Angels. Despite the presence of children and other witnesses, the shooting was seen as a clear message. The Hells Angels were willing to defend their turf at all costs. "We have all our enemies in our sights," was the chilling sentiment echoed after the incident. Following the shooting, police raided Lancha's residence, seizing weapons and crucial evidence. During the trial, the prosecution presented a disturbing video of Lancha shooting at Stano's vehicle without provocation. The defense attempted to justify the attack, claiming self-defense and suggesting that Stano had made threatening gestures. However, the weight of the evidence, particularly the video footage, swayed the jury, resulting in a 5-year prison sentence for Lancha. Additionally, an 8-year ban was imposed to prevent further contact with Stano, aiming to avert future conflicts between the rival gangs. In another shocking chapter tied to the Hells Angels, the case of William Furlong rocked the local community. Furlong's lifeless body was discovered near the Hells Angels clubhouse, adding to the growing list of violent incidents linked to the Notorious gang. The investigation ultimately led to Jay Witt and his girlfriend, Tammy Cack, both of whom were killed on the day of the crime at location B. Cack and Witt had left the club that morning carrying a plastic bag, and surveillance footage showed them cleaning up the scene. During the trial, Cack became a crucial witness, providing detailed accounts of the altercation between Witt and Furlong. The pair fled to Harland, Iowa, where they were eventually captured. Witt was charged with capital murder and sentenced to 30 years in prison. While the community remained deeply shaken, Witt's conviction offered a sense of justice. However, while incarcerated at the Nebraska State Penitentiary, Witt died under unclear medical circumstances, bringing a tragic end to the case and one of the darkest chapters in local criminal history. Some might even call it an act of divine justice. In another unsettling case, Adam Lee Hall, a notorious member of the Hells Angels, was charged with murder in Hempton Superior Court, marking yet another grim event linked to the infamous gang. Kidnapping and witness intimidation. He had a violent past. He was obsessed with eliminating those he saw as a threat, including David Glaser, whom Hall had in the past brutally beat Glaser because he believed he had stolen a carburetor when Glaser agreed to testify in a drug and gun trial against Hall. Hall meticulously planned a brutal attack to silence him. He also murdered 2 of Glaser's friends, Edward Frampton and Robert, who were present at the time of the murders 11 days after their disappearance. The dismembered bodies of Glaser, Frampton, and Chatwell were found buried, a crime that deeply shocked the community. Witness statements from 2 of the defendants described Hall as a cold, calculating person who orchestrated the murders without remorse. The defense tried to refute these statements, but the jury stood firm and sentenced Hall to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Prosecutor David Kekles praised the authorities' diligent work and stressed the importance of bringing justice to the victims, whose tragic end had left a lasting impression on the community despite the collective grief. The conviction brought HS some relief as it ensured he would never again commit such crimes. The HS Angels connection involved Caius Vov, a member of the Aaron Brotherhood and an accomplice in the murders alongside Hall, who was known for his eccentric behavior and penchant for violence. He was arrested after a thorough investigation which uncovered disturbing evidence. During the trial, the prosecution presented knives and sketches of human dissections as evidence, suggesting a fascination with torture. Although Wovis pleaded not guilty, the jury found him guilty and also sentenced him to life imprisonment. This verdict underlined the seriousness of the crime and the profound impact of his actions on the victims and their families. The death of William Furlong, who was found dead near the organization's clubhouse. This was yet another incident that added to the growing list of crimes involving these bikers, prompting a comprehensive investigation. The primary suspects were Jehu and his partner Tammy Kay, both seen at the club in the early hours of the morning when the crime took place. CCTV footage showed them leaving the area around 9:30 a.m., carrying a plastic bag and seemingly cleaning the scene, likely to cover up evidence. The prosecution relied heavily on Tammy Kay's testimony, in which she confessed that Witt had warned her about a body being on the stairs after an argument with a fellow member. This led to the issuance of arrest warrants, and after a 2-week search, Witt and Kak were located in Harland, Iowa. Witt was officially charged with manslaughter, and the trial attracted significant public attention, especially after he was sentenced to 30 years in prison. For many in the community, the verdict provided a small sense of relief after the grief and fear the murder had caused. However, during his time in the Nebraska State Penitentiary, Witt died under unclear medical circumstances, bringing closure to one of the darkest chapters in the gang's recent history. The brutality of the Hells Angels was further highlighted in the case of Adam Lee Hall, who faced charges in Hampton Superior Court for murder, kidnapping, and witness intimidation. Hall, already known for his violent behavior and past convictions, became the center of attention after a confrontation with David Glasser. Hall had brutally attacked Glasser with a baseball bat, accusing him of stealing a carburetor. When Glasser agreed to testify against Hall in a drug and firearms trial, Hall devised a plan to eliminate him and silence the potential threat. The situation took an even darker turn when Hall murdered not only Glasser, but also his friends, Edward Frampton and Robert Chadwell, who had been present at the crime scene. Despite showing no signs of remorse, the trial was lengthy and complex, but the compelling evidence and testimony presented to the jury led to a guilty verdict. Hall was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, a decision that brought both relief and sorrow to the affected community. Prosecutor David Capeless commended the authorities for their relentless efforts and for delivering justice to the victims. He reminded the community of the power of the law in combating the brutality of organized crime. Another member of the organization, Caius Vieuvus, was also prosecuted in connection with the murders orchestrated by Hall. The prosecution presented strong evidence against Vieuvus, a notorious figure known for his violent tendencies and intimidating demeanor. Investigators uncovered knives and anatomical diagrams in his possession, suggesting a disturbing fascination with torture. Despite Vieuvus' defense, the evidence pointed to his complicity in the crimes, contributing to the overall dark legacy of the organization. Despite pleading not guilty, the jury swiftly found Caius Vieuvus guilty and sentenced him to life in prison. The details of the trial garnered significant media attention, particularly due to the psychological impact of his actions and the cruelty that shocked the community. Meanwhile, across the country in Pacific Beach, San Diego, Stephen Sanders, a local leader of the Hells Angels, was involved in yet another violent episode that left several individuals injured. This case sparked widespread concern, not only because of the attack itself, but also due to the subsequent intimidation of witnesses and police officers, a typical tactic employed by the organization to hinder cooperation with authorities. During the trial, prosecutor Bonnie Dumanis highlighted the danger Sanders posed to the community, emphasizing the need for justice and safety. The conviction of Stephen Sanders marked a significant victory, underscoring the judicial system's commitment to holding individuals accountable for their violent actions. Sanders was sentenced to 25 years in prison after extensive evidence was presented against him, including multiple witness testimonies that detailed his efforts to intimidate both witnesses and police officers. In a last-ditch effort to retract his guilty plea, Sanders claimed he had been pressured by the prospect of a harsher sentence. These decisions reflect the judiciary's firm stance against the criminal activities of the Hells Angels, an organization that continues to spread its influence and violence through local chapters across the country. The group's hierarchical structure and strong internal loyalties made the investigation complex, but the court sent a clear message: crimes committed by the Hells Angels would not go unpunished. Despite their attempts to instill fear and intimidation in the communities they infiltrate, justice would ultimately prevail.